Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time remake is almost out. This time hopefully I'm correct in saying that, since I've already made that mistake. 5 years ago. Yeah, and it's been almost nothing but radio silence since then. At the time I'm writing this, we still don't have a confirmed 2026 release date, despite some rumors forcing my hand into production of this video. Yet despite all that, I'm still excited for the remake because I love Sands of Time. While there are several other Prince of Persia games I'm fond of, they're no Sands of Time.
Out of the way, you!
A polished platformer with innovative time controlling and parkour mechanics, wonderfully designed areas, immersive character building, and a film adaptation that I still herald as the best theatrical video game movie. I just rewatched it and it's nothing great, kinda sloppy, but it's an entertaining summer blockbuster that still feels like Prince of Persia. It's safe to say that, despite several being more than strong enough to stand on their own, every Prince of Persia game that released afterwards has lived in its shadow. Go look at criticisms of The Lost Crown and you'll see what I mean. Because of that, it might be hard to remember, but Sands of Time had something to prove when it released. 2003 was still early enough in the 3D transitionary period that there was concern to whether a given franchise could successfully make the jump, and in Prince of Persia's case, they had already fumbled that once. This wasn't even made by the same developers and took very little from those earlier games. Ubisoft had to work to sell this game, and at the time, there was one method of doing so that stood above the rest: demos. More than a severely cut trailer or commercial or still screenshots next to text in a magazine, the ability for a prospective audience to get to play the game in question and judge for themselves is unmatched. So, Ubisoft put out a demo disc, I believe with pre-orders, but I haven't managed to find a source that confirms that. It wouldn't be unusual, Resident Evil 4 famously did the same thing. Sure, it's no Nintendo giving the full Ocarina of Time with Wind Waker pre-orders, but it's a nice bonus. It looks like it was available in early October, a month ahead of the full game's November release, though IGN's remarks that it's the same levels they've been playing since May lends credence to the idea that the build is a lot older than October. And this disc was only on the PS2, despite the game also releasing on Xbox, GameCube, and PC. Not to say there weren't other demos, a very similar PS2 demo was included with the jam-packed Winter 2003 demo disc, and what appears to be the same demo was also present on the demo disc included with the official Xbox Magazine's November 2003 issue, though I believe the standalone disc hit the market first. There was also a PC demo available for download later, but from the videos I've seen, it doesn't have much interesting to say about it. Anyway, with the remake coming out, I thought it'd be fun to go through the demo and compare it to the final game to see how Ubisoft sold this game and where those extra 6 months or so of development went before we see what an extra 5 years can do. To put it into perspective, a demo of Two Thrones from May 2005 could potentially have been a completely different game. And if Uncle Derek isn't going to do these kinds of videos anymore, hey, I can. Now, a quick disclaimer about the comparison. The only version of Sands of Time I currently own is the PS3 Trilogy release, not any of the original console versions. This is easily the version I'm most familiar with, though it's not held in high regard as one of the best HD trilogies of its generation. Because of the lack of a one-to-one comparison, I won't be mentioning any technical differences. Things like lighting, effects, textures, anything I can't guarantee is the result of demo to final, instead of demo to final to HD. With that out of the way, it's time to get super nerdy. As soon as the game boots, the demo uses the generic Ubisoft logo of the day with the copyright information, instead of the final game specifically crediting Ubisoft Montreal and the POP team, playing the CG intro, and then putting the copyright information below the game's logo. And speaking of the logo, the demo's logo is completely different. The one on the box matches the final, which again leads me to think the game build is a good deal older. Otherwise, the title screen is mostly the same aside from different options. The sound, camera, and controller settings are all split into their own title screen menus instead of all being placed under one main options banner, and there's no option for progressive output. The demo also includes a trailer for the game, one that uses another, presumably even older logo. The music on the menu is also different. Starting the game still has the camera tracked to the prince standing on the balcony, where the player walks inside to start the game. This is where I discovered two things. First, the cheat code to access the recreation of the first level of the original Prince of Persia doesn't work. And second, the analog sticks on a PS1 controller don't work. I own two PS2 controllers and one PS1 controller, and the latter is my preferred controller, but it doesn't work here. I even found footage of someone else having, presumably, the same issue on the jam-packed demo disc version.
Is this a low screen or is it not working?
Thankfully, just switching to a DualShock 2 fixed the problem. Yeah, alright, I'm already breaking my rule because I have no way of confirming if this was the case on the PS2 full game, but I have my reasons for bringing it up. Once you really start the game, the full CG intro is missing, replaced with just text. From the darkness of ages, a terrible force is unleashed. Still, when it goes to in-game, it does pick up at the same place the full game does, though now we're missing the context on why the prince is only just waking up. And however it happened in the demo, it must have been rough, because both his sleeves are already ripped up. This didn't happen in the full game until a good deal later, pretty arbitrarily. And it's good to know that I won't have to label my footage, because the work in progress and the game's logo never disappear from the bottom corners of the demo. It feels like something you'd see on a show floor or a kiosk demo, not one released to the public. The cutscene itself is missing this pan to show the greater battle, and shows the Persian soldiers doing a second ram against the door, but is otherwise the same, though it feels a lot emptier in the demo thanks to two missing elements: the music and the prince's narration. Don't get excited thinking you might get some placeholder voice. Battle Foley is still done by Yuri Lowenthal, in what I feel many forget was one of his first major roles. It's just the in-game narration, one of the features that really set this game apart back in the day, that's gone, and you really start to feel the dead air when it's missing. But something else was bothering me as I looked at this demo in motion, but I wasn't sure until I looked over the footage later, though you might have spotted it first. The final game, at least on consoles, has a 30 FPS cap. The demo is unlocked. It does drop pretty heavily though, so maybe that's why they changed it. Warrior Within and Two Thrones on PC also report issues at anything above 59 FPS, so it's possible they discovered some engine issue late into development. Other than that, the gameplay is the same as you remember it. The map and controls are the same, except for the inversion on the camera. So I paused the game to fix it, and would you look at that, different pause screen. Again, just like on the main menu, the options are all split into their own choices. It's tan instead of blue, and there's a 3D silhouette of the prince. It's not necessary, but it's a fun detail, and I don't know why it was changed. Back in the game, the very first thing I did was kill myself as soon as possible. The final game has a fun framing device that the entire game is a story the prince is telling, so if you die, he has to correct himself.
Wait. That's not how it happened. Now where was it?
This detail is missing in the demo because there isn't even a continue screen. Die and a fade to white simply brings you back to the checkpoint, in this case before the cutscene. The ability to skip cutscenes by pressing X is also not here yet. Okay, time to actually start playing. The font for the tutorial tips is a little different, but it's pretty hard to tell. There's no way to turn them off in the demo either. The platforming all works the same way it's supposed to, though the slow motion effect early on to emphasize how cool it is also missing. Maybe the frame rate dips fill that hole. After the wall running tutorial, there's a spear guard present in the demo to serve as the combat tutorial, and without any close-ups to emphasize that importance. Not even the dramatic shot of the prince sheathing his sword and non-existent dagger after the fight is present. I only make a note of it because the final game has this guy on the other side of the wall through here, and there's a reason for the shift. See, after entering this door atop the wall, just as you're rounding the corner, a sudden fade to white interrupts the action. A magnificent palace, laid waste by the sands of time. Yes, this demo isn't just one uncut slice of the game, but a collection of various parts to give the player a varied sampler of what Sands of Time has to offer. There's no question that it's neat that they went to the trouble to splice them all together, even if it's not even close to being seamless. At the same time, I wonder why they felt the need. The siege on the Maharaja's palace is short, self-contained, and it contains everything you'll be seeing throughout the rest of the game. This part alone would have more than served as a suitable demo. What doesn't help is that the segments chosen feel like they were chosen somewhat randomly, because now we're in the baths. First of all, this is like halfway through the game. The room itself doesn't even look interesting, so that can't be the reason. All it does is serve as a place to try out fighting the sand creatures, but you could have done the same thing with the very first room in Azad right after the sands were released. Well, it is what it is. The hole that leads into the room has nothing on the other side in the demo, perhaps to help obscure the fact that Farah is absent from here and the whole demo. Her AI was already poor in the final game. I wonder if they weren't even there yet. They hadn't finished the HUD yet, as we can see by this totally different design. I do think it looks a little messier, and the rewind meter does not need to be that big. Probably for the best this got altered. They also only give you the default health and 4 sand and power tanks, and by this point in a 100% playthrough, I've got 6 sand tanks while starting on the 7th, and I'm on my way to the 6th power tank. Combat works the same way it would in the final, knock the sand creatures down and stab them with the dagger to absorb them. But something about it feels different. This is hard to confirm, so the best I can do is give my opinion, but it feels a little faster in the demo, a little more free. And actually, I don't like it. Prince of Persia is a series about deliberate action. Making things too light and smooth risks at feeling brainless is actually my biggest problem with Sands of Time on GBA. It's really not that bad here, just at the stage of needing a bit of tightening up that it got. Not that it really matters, because that only pops up when you're not playing the game with the one true dominant strategy, which works in both versions. It's actually more effective in the demo, because the dancers are susceptible to the easier variant here. Actually, it feels like enemies are less defensive in general in the demo. You really can just mindlessly attack them and get results. The demo only has 1 wave of enemies before the save point appears, as opposed to the final game's 2, though that first wave has double the dancers, 6 to the final's 3. And as I'm taking them down, I notice 2 things. First, the enemies drop their weapons when they disappear, which actually threw me off. Later games have this happen because you can pick their weapons up to use as a secondary, and I was almost convinced that mechanic originated here. And second, when they're laying on the ground, they actually make moves to try and get up, while in the final they remain completely motionless. I think I see the idea though. Them moving might make it seem like they have some sort of grounded attack. Being perfectly still indicates they're completely helpless. After the combat encounter is over, the save point appears in the same place it does in the final. But I'm not going there yet, not when I can freely walk around the rest of the room. And the most interesting thing I found? The sound of your sword clanging off the wall isn't there yet.
That door doesn't look so strong.
Okay, on we go. Entering the save point still prompts a video montage of what to expect next. Except, it's not the same one it normally would be, instead featuring these segments from earlier in the game. Oddly, they let the prince wake up before fading out afterwards, instead of using the transition already there. The deadliest traps cannot defeat this enemy. We're now in, this room a decent bit earlier. Okay, this was shown in the vision, but so was the puzzle with rotating the axles into place, which not only happened right before this, but also isn't in the demo at all. And it's not a case of them recycling a movie from the final, this is newly cut. I guess they just really wanted to make sure you knew the full game would have a puzzle about a guy screaming at you.
That's it! You've got the first axle! Now, pick up the other 3!
As the room starts, we get a flyby completely different from the final game, one a lot more direct. I'm guessing, since this is the first puzzle/platforming room in the demo, they wanted to be sure you wouldn't be lost, while the full game had an hour of gameplay before this point to acclimate the player. They also made the demo version easier by removing the enemies, which is less understandable because the purpose of the last segment was to get you used to the combat. However, since there's no enemies, they also took out the fountain on the ground level. And no wonder we're limited to 4 sand tanks, the sand cloud is missing too. Other than that, the traps are the same with the same spike behavior. I actually was caught off guard seeing the spikes trigger when the prince ran above them, not touching them, but that's accurate. I might have been confused because the different camera framing and widescreen mostly obscured them in this specific instance. They also put a save point pretty haphazardly halfway up, despite the fact that you can clearly see the level continues on past it. Don't get any funny ideas though, it has a wide area effect. I don't think you can run past it. But I'd love to be proven wrong. Time is running out. We pick up as the prince falls into the palace prisons. No music again, which really hurts it here. Sands of Time is a game that isn't afraid to rely solely on ambience for its soundtrack, but it also knows when it needs to use music to sell a moment. Here's a comparison. In fact, during gameplay, the only song present is the regular battle theme, which plays in the battle in the baths. Other than this enemy being missing during the camera pan, and the door behind the prince at the beginning being an openable gate instead of a static door, this whole section is basically identical. I did notice that the elevators seemingly aren't working yet, so a ladder was added, but that's about it. And that comes down to the fact that this part is really linear. I don't know why they picked it. It's pretty late into the game, so late that the prince should have an upgraded sword by now, which I would consider a spoiler. It's an okay demonstration of the parkour, but there are better ones. Maybe it was just to let players know when he loses his shirt, as that's how he's depicted on the box art, even on the alternate render used for this weird full-sized cardboard sleeve. Once you get on the ladder that would lead to the floor, the game abruptly flashes away from the action again. The one who can stop it is the one who started it all. For our final gameplay segment, we get something wholly original. The placement of the 3 sarcophagi indicates that this is the tomb the prince and Farah fall into after their first failed visit to the hourglass, but this was a cutscene only room in the final game, where everything but that was shrouded in total darkness. They hop down into a secret passage and into the caves below, and you forget about that room because of Naked Farah. Here, the room is fully illuminated with a breakable wall, and a brightly illuminated door with Farah waiting. And that's the Sands of Time demo. All in all, it takes about 10 minutes to finish it, perhaps faster if you really speedrun it, something I want to try. For a show floor or kiosk demo, it works, giving a good variety of environments while still highlighting all the game's mechanics. Actually, the overall lack of enemies limits the number of rewinds you can get, incentivizing attendees to get a move on. But as a standalone product, it's too scattershot, each section is too short to feel fulfilling. If this was indeed given out with pre-orders, it was going to customers that were already sold. They didn't need a sampler platter, just early access. This demo being included on demo discs makes more sense, but this specific thing here is really just a neat novelty for hardcore Prince of Persia fans. It's not too hard to get, basically nothing Prince of Persia is expensive, though it does tend to run more than an equivalent PS2 copy of the full game. It does have one more thing though. The original Prince of Persia. Not a demo, the entire original game, accessible right from the main menu. This is not only not included on the demo disc variants, but because the deluge of Prince of Persia ports had dried up by the time the PlayStation launched, this was the first way to play that game on a PS2. For 1 month, because as I'm sure some of you know, this wasn't unlockable in Sands of Time on PS2, GameCube, and Xbox, though it is missing on PC and PS3. Not emulated, a native port using the Macintosh version as a basis, and near as I can tell, it's identical to the one included in the final game. It doesn't do a whole lot of good for me specifically. If you've seen my review of the original Prince of Persia, I said I prefer the classic remake on 360 and PS3, but this would have been nice to get footage with, so let's take a look. And I can't get it to work. It's just straight up not recognizing any inputs. That confused me, because I'm sure I tried this out when I first bought the demo disc, and I know it would have worked fine. And it didn't matter which controller I used, I swapped in all three I own and got nowhere. I finally figured it out. They made a mistake with the configuration, and by default, it's looking for inputs from the Player 2 port. I have a Brook adapter for my PS2, and when I'm not using it, I leave it in the second port for safekeeping. If it's unplugged, control switches back to Player 1, but it's wild to me that a wholly single-player game ever needs to pull the second port. And keep in mind, this bug was in a product a month from launch. Technically, I don't know if this was ever fixed. My only frame of reference was playing the original Prince of Persia once on my GameCube a long time ago, when there wouldn't have been anything in the other ports to begin with. But it just goes to show what changes are still being made so close to the Gold Master, which is why I'm anxiously waiting to see what 5 years of improvements can look like for the remake, and I can only hope we've gotten that by the time this video goes up. I wonder if we can get a recreation of this demo for download for the remake.